The summer heat hung heavy over Redwood Falls, a small, almost forgotten town nestled between dark pine forests and silent mountains in rural America. Tourists rarely came here, and those who did never stayed for long. The locals whispered too much, their eyes darting nervously toward the dense woods at the edge of town. It was here that Jack Stevens, a 25-year-old freelance journalist, had arrived. Jack wasn't the kind of man who chased headlines about politics or sports. He sought the strange, the unexplained, the kinds of stories most reporters dismissed as folklore. And Redwood Falls promised exactly that. For over a year, people had been vanishing in the forests. Hikers, hunters, even a few townsfolk. At first, everyone assumed wild animals or accidents were to blame. But then, some of those missing people returned. Alive, but not the same. Their eyes seemed hollow, their memories erased. They couldn't explain where they'd been, or what had happened. They spoke in fragments, shivered uncontrollably, and often collapsed into silence. Some stared at nothing for hours, as though caught in invisible chains. Jack knew there was more to the story. The evening he arrived, the town already seemed uneasy. Redwood Falls had one main street, lined with shuttered shops, a half-empty diner, and an old ranger station that doubled as the sheriff's office. Everywhere he went, people avoided his questions. But Jack had been doing this long enough to know how to listen when people didn't want to speak. At the diner, a waitress finally whispered, "If you're here about the disappearances, you won't find answers in town. The forest keeps its secrets. People go in, and sometimes they come back wrong." When Jack pressed further, the woman's eyes flicked toward the woods visible through the diner's window. The treeline looked thicker than it should, shadows curling unnaturally between the branches, even under the fading daylight. The next morning, Jack set out toward the forest. He carried his notepad, a camera, and a small digital recorder. His journalist's instinct told him something extraordinary was buried here, something that blurred the line between fact and nightmare. The trail was quiet, too quiet. The usual hum of insects, the chatter of birds, even the rustle of leaves seemed to vanish as he stepped deeper into the woods. The air grew heavier, damp, almost suffocating. And then he heard it, a whisper, not quite words, but the sound of something breathing just beyond the trees. Jack froze, heart pounding, eyes scanning the foliage. He saw nothing, but every nerve in his body screamed that he was being watched. His camera flickered, the screen freezing for seconds at a time. His phone went from full bars to no signal in an instant. Technology doesn't just fail like that. Not unless something else is interfering. He kept moving, following the faint path deeper into the forest. The further he went, the stronger the feeling became. It wasn't just paranoia. Someone was watching him. By dusk, the trees had swallowed what little sunlight remained. Jack was about to turn back when he saw it. A mansion. Its silhouette rose out of the woods like a wound in reality. The structure looked ancient, its roof sagging, its walls dark with age and rot. Ivy clung to its surface, but not in a natural way. It looked as though the vines themselves were pulsing, alive, feeding off the house. From the second-floor windows, a faint red glow flickered. Jack's breath caught. No one had mentioned a mansion in Redwood Falls. In fact, looking at it now, it felt impossible that such a massive structure could exist here without being on any maps. Drawn by equal parts fear and curiosity, Jack stepped closer. The woods around him seemed to hold their breath. Even the wind stopped moving. He reached the front door. Its wood was warped and blackened with age, the brass handle dulled. He hesitated, then lifted his hand. Before he could touch it, the door creaked open on its own. A wave of cold air rushed out, smelling faintly of damp earth and iron, like blood. Jack swallowed hard. His instincts screamed at him to run, but the journalist in him, the seeker of truth, pushed him forward. He raised his camera, pressed record, and stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. The foyer stretched out in eerie silence. Dust floated in the air like ash. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, peeling in long strips. A grand staircase wound upward, but the banister was cracked, splintered, as though something had clawed at it. Jack's flashlight beam swept across the floor. Faint stains marked the wooden boards, dark, irregular blotches that looked disturbingly like dried blood. And then he saw the portrait. Hanging crooked above the fireplace was an old, enormous painting. The frame was cracked, the canvas dim with age. The figure in the portrait was a woman, tall, dressed in black Victorian clothing. Her hair pinned neatly, her face pale. Her eyes? Jack froze. Her eyes were too real. The longer he stared, the more certain he became that they weren't painted at all. They gleamed faintly, following him, alive within the canvas. A chill crawled down his spine. The air in the mansion shifted, heavy and suffocating. Somewhere deep inside, the floor groaned, followed by a faint whisper that rose through the walls. Jack's grip tightened on his camera. He took one cautious step backward. And then, from the shadows beneath the staircase, he heard it. Footsteps, not his own. Something was moving in the mansion with him. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly through the mansion, muffled yet sharp, as though someone or something was deliberately letting him know he wasn't alone. Jack froze, his camera trembling in his hands. The red recording light blinked steadily, capturing everything, even the rapid sound of his own breathing. "Hello!" His voice cracked in the silence. "Is anyone here?" No response. Only the long, drawn-out creak of wood settling, or perhaps shifting under invisible weight. The mansion was old, yes, but not empty. Jack could feel it. The air wasn't stagnant. It pulsed, as if the building itself had a heartbeat. Every step he took was answered by another faint sound deeper within. He forced himself to move forward, flashlight sweeping across cracked wallpaper and broken picture frames. Dust swirled in the beam like disturbed ash. Then his light stopped. On the wall beside him were strange symbols, carved crudely into the plaster. Spirals, lines, jagged figures. None of it made sense. Some were smeared with a darker substance that looked too much like dried blood. Jack lifted his camera closer. The lens flickered, then blurred, as though it refused to focus on the carvings. He cursed under his breath. What the hell happened here? The footsteps had gone silent, but something else filled the void. A sound, like dripping ink. Jack turned. On the far side of the hall, beneath the portrait of the strange woman, the wall was bleeding. At first, he thought it was water damage, dark stains seeping through cracks in the wallpaper. But as he stepped closer, he saw the truth. Thick, crimson-black liquid was oozing downward, crawling across the wall like veins. It pooled on the floor in slick, glistening patterns. And it moved, not randomly, but with intent, flowing toward the center of the room, forming strange, writhing shapes. Jack's throat tightened. He raised his camera again, whispering, This isn't possible." Through the lens, the truth became clearer. Shadows, dozens of them, writhed within the ink, taking form. Distorted human silhouettes, their limbs bent wrong, their heads bowed as if in pain. They shifted and twisted, trying to crawl free of the spreading stain. But without the camera, his eyes only saw the walls running black. Jack realized then the camera wasn't just recording. It was revealing. The air grew colder. His breath came out in pale clouds. The portrait above the fireplace seemed to lean closer. The woman's eyes glistened with a wet, lifelike sheen. And in the corners of his vision, the shadows twisted faster, more desperate, as though they sensed his presence. Jack stepped back, heart pounding. His boot splashed into a shallow pool of the dark liquid. Immediately, a whispering chorus filled his ears. Thousands of voices overlapping, hissing, pleading. He staggered, clutching his head, as the voices grew louder. "Help us. He's here. You shouldn't have come." Jack ripped his foot free, stumbling backward. The whispers faded, but not completely. They lingered like a low hum in his skull. The ink spread across the floorboards, climbing the walls, staining everything it touched. Jack's recorder crackled in his pocket. Static hissed, then a voice. Distorted, faint, but unmistakably human. "Get out." He yanked it free, staring at the small device in disbelief. The voice wasn't his, and it hadn't been there when he pressed record earlier. The mansion was speaking to him. A sharp bang jolted him. One of the doors down the hall had slammed shut. Jack spun, flashlight beam shaking across the corridor. Every door he passed creaked open just enough for darkness to spill through, as though inviting him deeper. "Nope," he muttered, forcing his voice steady. "You're not scaring me out of this. Not yet." But the truth was he was terrified. At the end of the hallway, another room beckoned. Its door was half open, the wood swollen with rot. Jack hesitated, then pushed it gently. It groaned, swinging wide to reveal what looked like an old study. Books lined the shelves, their pages yellowed, many warped from moisture. A desk sat in the corner, papers scattered across it, ink stains eating through the parchment. But it wasn't the desk that froze Jack's blood. It was the figure in the chair. At first, he thought it was a mannequin. The skin looked waxy, the head tilted at an unnatural angle. But as his light passed over it, he realized it was a man, what was left of one. His face was pale, lips cracked, eyes wide open in an endless stare. His chest didn't rise. He had been dead for years, yet his expression looked frozen mid-scream. And on the wall behind him, written in the same black-red ink, were words scrawled over and over. "The mansion remembers." Jack's stomach turned. He backed away, bile rising in his throat. But then the dead man's jaw twitched. A faint sound slipped from his lips. "Run." Jack stumbled, slamming into the doorframe. His flashlight beam darted wildly across the room. The corpse didn't move again. His mouth hung slack, the sound gone. But the ink on the wall pulsed. The letters shimmered, as though freshly written. Jack turned and fled the study, breath ragged. Back in the main hall, the portrait waited. The woman's painted eyes gleamed brighter now, almost luminous. For the briefest second, Jack could have sworn her lips curled into a faint, mocking smile. The ink had spread across nearly every surface. The mansion itself seemed alive, walls groaning, floorboards trembling beneath his feet. The air was thick, suffocating, filled with the metallic tang of blood. His camera recorded everything. Through its lens, the shadows were fully formed now. Men, women, children, all trapped within the writhing ink. Their mouths opened in silent screams, hands pressed against invisible barriers. Jack whispered, almost to himself, "The house is feeding on them." Suddenly, the front door slammed open with a deafening crack. Cold night air rushed in, extinguishing his flashlight. The hall plunged into darkness, lit only by the faint red glow bleeding from the portrait above the fireplace. Jack lifted his camera. In its digital screen, he saw movement, figures rushing toward him. He spun around, but to his eyes the hall was empty. Only the camera revealed the truth. Dozens of shadowy forms racing closer, their mouths open, their limbs twisted, their faces masks of agony. The walls shuddered, and the floor beneath him buckled as though trying to swallow him whole. The mansion wasn't just alive. It wanted him. Jack ran. His boots pounded across the warped floorboards, the camera still clutched tightly in his hands. Doors slammed shut as he passed. Windows rattled. A deafening chorus of whispers filled the air, merging into screams. Somewhere behind him, something massive stirred. Something heavier, louder than the shadows. Jack didn't dare look back. He crashed through another hallway, blindly searching for an exit. His light flickered back on, casting trembling beams across the walls. More ink, more symbols, more faces pressed within the stains. He burst through a side door and stumbled into what must have once been a parlor. Dust-covered furniture loomed in the gloom. Curtains hung in tatters. And there, in the center of the room, a new portrait awaited. This one was unfinished. It showed a man, features still half-sketched, half-formed. But the eyes were perfect. And they were his. Jack's own face stared back at him from the canvas. The air went silent. For one breathless moment, all sound in the mansion ceased. Then the ink surged upward from the floor, spilling across the walls, rushing toward the portrait. The unfinished painting pulsed as though alive, the brushstrokes filling in rapidly. The mansion wasn't just watching him. It was trying to claim him. The morning sun rose pale and weak, its light struggling to break through the thick veil of mist that clung to Redwood Falls. Jack hadn't slept. His body ached. His mind reeled from the horrors of the night. Yet something inside him urged him to keep going. The mansion was only part of the mystery. The answers lay deeper, buried in the forest that surrounded the cursed estate. Jack packed his gear with shaking hands. Camera, flashlight, notepad. A small revolver he had kept in the glove compartment of his car, though he doubted bullets could stop what he had seen. He glanced back at the mansion from the tree line. In the morning light, it looked almost harmless. Its broken windows and sagging roof just another ruin swallowed by time. But he knew better. The house was alive, and whatever lived inside was feeding. The trail into the woods was barely visible, swallowed by thick undergrowth and shadow. Jack pushed forward, his boots crunching damp leaves, every step swallowed by the eerie silence. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. The forest felt unnatural, as if life itself had fled. After an hour of walking, Jack found it. Clearing. At its center, half buried in moss and vines, stood a machine. It was enormous, a grotesque structure of rusted metal and dark wood, unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Its frame twisted upward like skeletal arms, gears interlocked with pipes that pulsed faintly, as though blood flowed through them instead of oil. Strange runes were etched into its surface, the same markings he had seen inside the mansion. The machine hummed softly, a low vibration that crawled into Jack's bones. And surrounding it were cages, rust-eaten, broken, but unmistakably cages, large enough to hold a person. Bones lay scattered within some, brittle and pale against the green moss. Others were empty, doors hanging ajar. Jack felt bile rise in his throat. This wasn't just a machine. It was an altar. He raised his camera, filming every detail. As the lens focused on the central chamber of the contraption, something flickered across the screen. For a split second, Jack saw people. Dozens of them. Men, women, children. All crammed inside the machine's heart. Their faces pale and hollow, eyes wide with despair. Their mouths moved in silent screams. Jack lowered the camera, but to his naked eye, the chamber was empty. He lifted the lens again. The figures were still there, reaching toward him, their hands pressed against the inside of the screen as though begging him to pull them free. A voice broke the silence. "You see them too, don't you?" Jack spun, revolver raised. At the edge of the clearing stood a man. His clothes were tattered, his skin pale, his eyes sunken and rimmed with dark circles. He looked half dead, like someone who hadn't slept in years. "Who are you?" Jack demanded. The man smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "A victim, like the rest of them, but I escaped." Jack's grip tightened. "Escaped from what?" The man gestured to the machine. "From him. From the master of this forest. From the one who built this device to feed his hunger." Jack's pulse quickened. "You're talking about the mansion's owner." The man nodded slowly. "Dr. Elias Harrow. He was once a scholar, obsessed with immortality. He believed the soul was a form of energy, that it could be harvested, contained, reused. He built this machine to prove it." Jack glanced back at the structure. The runes seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, twisting and shifting like living things. "And it worked?" Jack asked. The man's expression hardened. "Too well. He drew people into these woods, promised them safety, shelter. But he caged them, drained them, and fed their souls into the machine. He gave his body to the mansion, his spirit to this forest. Now he is everywhere, and nowhere." Before Jack could reply, the air shifted. A low growl rippled through the clearing, so deep it made the earth tremble. The man's face drained of color. "He knows you're here," he whispered. From the shadows between the trees, something stirred. It stepped into the clearing with slow, deliberate movements. At first, Jack thought it was human. But the closer it came, the more wrong it appeared. Its body was tall, gaunt, skin stretched too tight over its bones. Its eyes burned crimson, glowing like hot coals in a skull-like face. Its mouth was jagged, filled with too many teeth, each dripping with black ichor. The shadows bent toward it, as though pulled by gravity. Jack realized with dawning horror this was Elias Harrow, or what was left of him. The man beside Jack stumbled backward, shaking. "Run," he begged. "Run before it takes you too." But Jack didn't move. His camera was still rolling, and through its lens, he saw the creature for what it truly was. Not just a figure of flesh and bone, but a writhing mass of trapped souls, their faces stretching across its body, mouths screaming silently in eternal torment. Every step the creature took toward him was echoed by the cries of the damned. Jack lifted his revolver, fired once. The bullet tore through the air, striking the creature's chest. It didn't flinch. Instead, it smiled. The sound that followed wasn't a roar, but a laugh, low, guttural, echoing through the forest like thunder. Jack's blood ran cold. The creature raised one clawed hand, and the ground beneath Jack's feet rippled. Roots burst upward, twisting around his ankles, pulling him down. He fought, struggling to break free, but the more he pulled, the tighter they grew. The man who had spoken with him screamed, bolting into the trees. For a moment, Jack thought he might escape. But the creature moved faster than his eyes could follow. One moment, it was standing before the machine. The next, it was behind the fleeing man, its claws piercing through his chest. The man's scream choked off instantly. His body went limp. The creature lifted him high, then pressed him against the machine. The runes ignited. The man's body convulsed, his eyes wide with terror as light bled from them, streaming into the machine. His scream returned, louder, more agonized, until it cut off suddenly. His body crumpled, lifeless, as the machine pulsed with new energy. The clearing filled with whispers, familiar, haunting. "Help us. Join us. You cannot fight him." Jack tore himself free from the roots, stumbling backward. His mind screamed at him to run, but his eyes remained locked on the creature. For one chilling moment, their gazes met, and Jack understood something horrifying. It wasn't enough for Harrow to consume. He wanted to replace. He wanted Jack. Jack ran. Through the trees, over fallen logs, across tangled underbrush. Branches tore at his arms and face. The forest bent around him, the paths shifting, twisting, leading him in circles. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Behind him, the sound of footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, unhurried. The predator following prey it knew couldn't escape. By the time Jack stumbled out of the trees and collapsed against the trunk of his car, his lungs were burning, his body trembling. He looked back once. The forest loomed silent, dark, waiting. The creature was gone. But Jack knew it hadn't given up. It was only a matter of time. Jack sat in his car for what felt like hours, trembling hands clutching the steering wheel. His shirt clung to him with sweat. His heart refused to slow down. Every time he blinked, he saw the creature's crimson eyes burning in the forest, saw the souls twisting inside its body. He should have driven away, left Redwood Falls, abandoned the nightmare. But he knew he couldn't. The faces he saw in the machine haunted him. The children, the families, the people trapped for eternity. They weren't gone. They were waiting for someone to free them. And somehow, he knew the answer lay in the mansion. By dusk, Jack stood once more before the looming estate. The setting sun painted the crumbling stone in hues of fire and blood. The broken windows glared down at him like hollow eyes, daring him to step inside again. Jack adjusted his camera strap and whispered to himself, "You wanted a story, Stevens. Now finish it." He pushed the door open. It welcomed him with the same groaning creak, as though it had been expecting his return. Inside, the air was thicker, heavier than before. The ink-like stains had spread across the walls, writhing like veins pumping blood through a living body. The floorboards flexed beneath his boots, alive with subtle vibrations. Jack lifted his flashlight. The beam shook with his hands, but he forced himself forward. He knew what he was looking for. The painting. The mansion didn't make it easy. Every corridor seemed longer than it had before. Doors shifted places. Windows blinked open, then shut, as though the house itself was rearranging. Shadows stretched and shrank, warping into twisted figures that skittered across the walls. Whispers taunted him at every turn. You cannot fight him. You are already his. Join us, join us. Jack gritted his teeth, muttering under his breath. Not a chance. At last he found it. The grand hall, and hanging above the cracked marble fireplace, bathed in faint red glow, was the portrait of the woman. But it was different now. The first time her face had been stoic, lifeless. Now her expression twisted in amusement. Lips curled into a cruel smile. Her eyes shimmered like glass marbles filled with fire. Jack's stomach nodded. He didn't need anyone to tell him. This was the source. The painting wasn't decoration. It was the anchor, the prison, the key. If he destroyed it, maybe he could sever Harrow's grip on the mansion. Jack lifted a heavy candlestick from a side table, its iron rusted but solid. He stepped toward the painting, his breath shallow, every sense screaming that he was being watched. He raised the makeshift weapon, and the mansion screamed. The walls shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling. Doors slammed shut one by one in a thunderous chain reaction. The floorboards groaned as if something enormous was shifting beneath them. From the corner of his vision, shadows peeled themselves from the walls, forming into human shapes, headless, armless, crawling toward him on hands that weren't hands. Their mouths gaped open, filled with ink, spilling black fluid onto the floor. The air reeked of rot and blood. Jack swung the candlestick hard. It smashed against the portrait's frame, wood splintering with a sharp crack. The house shrieked louder. Suddenly, the shadows converged, merging into a single mass at the far end of the hall. It grew taller, broader, its form solidifying into the figure Jack had seen in the forest. Elias Harrow. His crimson eyes glared across the hall. His mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged, inhuman teeth. You dare? The voice boomed, rattling the windows. It wasn't just sound. It was inside Jack's head, vibrating in his skull. Jack steadied himself, heart pounding. You've taken enough lives. It ends here. Harrow laughed, a sound like bones breaking. End? There is no end. I am eternal. You are nothing but fuel. The creature lunged. Jack dove aside, the monster's claws ripping through the air where he had stood. The floor splintered, black ooze spilling upward like blood from a wound. He scrambled to his feet, swinging the candlestick again. This time, the blow struck the canvas itself. The woman's painted face screamed. Her eyes wept black tears. The entire mansion convulsed as though stabbed. Harrow roared in fury, his body flickering, his form unstable. The shadows that composed him wriggled like worms, breaking apart then rejoining. Jack realized the truth. Destroying the portrait weakened him. But he wasn't done yet. The Reator charged again, slamming Jack against the wall. The impact stole his breath, pain exploding across his ribs. Harrow leaned close, hot breath reeking of sulfur and decay. You cannot break me, he hissed. I am bound to every stone, every drop of blood spilled here. You will die screaming like the rest. Jack gasped, forcing out the words. Not if I break your anchor. He drove the candlestick upward, smashing it into the portrait with everything he had left. The canvas tore. The painted woman's face split down the middle, her scream echoing like shattering glass. Red light burst from the tear, flooding the hall in blinding flashes. Harrow staggered, clutching his head. His crimson eyes dimmed, his form unraveling like smoke caught in the wind. The mansion shook violently, pieces of ceiling crashing to the floor. Fire erupted from the walls, black ooze igniting like oil. Jack dropped to his knees, covering his head as the portrait exploded into flames. Harrow's roar filled the air, deafening, furious, and desperate. No, you cannot undo me. I am forever. But his voice fractured, breaking apart into 1,000 echoes before vanishing into silence. When Jack looked up, the hall was collapsing. The shadows dissolved into nothing, leaving behind scorched wood and broken stone. The mansion's heartbeat slowed, its groans fading into stillness. And for the first time since he had stepped inside, Jack felt the air lighten. He stumbled toward the front door as the building crumbled around him. The floor buckled, the roof caved, but somehow he made it outside. Behind him, the mansion collapsed in on itself, a dying beast consumed by its own fire. Jack fell to his knees in the grass, gasping, sweat and soot clinging to his skin. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from deep within the ruins, came one final sound. Not a scream, not a roar, but a whisper. This isn't over. The night swallowed Redwood Falls whole. The fire that consumed the mansion still burned behind Jack, its glow staining the horizon like a wound. But even as the flames rose higher, he knew it wasn't over. The creature wasn't gone. Jack staggered down the dirt path, lungs aching, body bruised. Every step felt heavier, as though the forest itself were dragging him back. He didn't need to look behind him to know the truth. Harrow was following. The air grew colder with each step. The trees leaned closer, branches curling inward like skeletal hands. The path twisted unnaturally, changing beneath his feet. He was being led not to safety but deeper into the woods. And then he heard it. The laugh. Low at first, like the crackle of distant fire. Then louder, echoing through the trees, bouncing from every direction. "You cannot destroy me," the voice rumbled. "The house was only my shell. I am the forest now. I am the night itself." Jack gritted his teeth, clutching his revolver tighter. "Then I'll kill you here, no matter what you are." The trees ahead shifted, parting to reveal a clearing bathed in moonlight. At its center stood Harrow. No longer bound to the mansion, his form had changed. He was larger now, towering nearly 10 feet. His body composed of writhing black shadows woven together like sinew. Faces still swam across his chest, their mouths opening and closing in eternal screams. His crimson eyes blazed brighter than ever, twin suns of fire and hate. Jack raised his gun. His voice was steady now, fueled by rage. "I didn't come to run. I came to end this." The creature tilted its head, amused. "End this? Foolish man. You carry pieces of the darkness within you now. The mansion marked you. You are mine already." Jack fired. The bullet tore through the night, striking Harrow in the chest. The creature staggered slightly, but then laughed again. The sound was thick, choking, like corpses trying to breathe. "Do you see? You cannot harm me with mortal tools." Jack's hand trembled, but he didn't lower the gun. His other hand gripped the camera at his side. Through its screen, he saw something different. Harrow wasn't invincible. His body flickered, the shadows shifting erratically whenever the lens focused on him. The mansion may have been destroyed, but its power wasn't gone. It lingered inside the artifacts, inside the ink, inside Jack himself. If Harrow could use it, so could he. Jack closed his eyes, forcing calm into his lungs. He remembered the whispers in the hall, the ink seeping across the walls, the faces in the machine. They weren't just warnings. They were energy, raw, desperate energy waiting to be released. He raised the camera high, aiming it directly at Harrow. "Then let's see how you like your own darkness," Jack growled. The screen flared. Harrow shrieked, recoiling as if burned. The trapped souls inside his body writhed violently, pulling at him, tearing at his form. Jack felt it too. The darkness pouring through the camera, coursing into his arm, flooding his chest. It burned, searing like fire, but he held on. He aimed the energy outward, forcing it toward Harrow. The forest exploded with light and shadow. Trees bent and splintered. The ground cracked. The air itself screamed. Harrow staggered, his crimson eyes dimming. For the first time, Jack saw fear flicker across the monster's face. "No!" Harrow roared. "You cannot command what belongs to me." But Jack didn't stop. He focused harder, pouring every ounce of will into the weapon in his hands. His voice rang out over the chaos. "I'm not your victim. I'm your end." The energy surged, brighter and brighter, until Harrow's form split apart. The faces across his body ripped free, screaming as they dissolved into mist. His limbs convulsed, his chest caved inward, his crimson eyes shattered into shards of fire. The creature let out one final roar, a sound that shook the earth itself. Then his body collapsed inward, folding into smoke and ash before vanishing completely. Silence. The forest stilled. The air warmed. The suffocating pressure lifted. Jack fell to his knees, gasping, the camera slipping from his grasp. His arms shook violently, his vision blurred, but he forced himself to look up. The clearing was empty. The monster was gone. And for the first time in months, maybe years, the souls were free. From the edge of the clearing, figures emerged. At first, Jack thought they were shadows again. But no, they were people. Dozens of them. The missing townsfolk. Their bodies were whole, their eyes clear, though their faces were pale, confused. They looked at him with gratitude, some weeping silently, others smiling faintly. They didn't speak, but Jack understood. He had freed them. Jack bowed his head, exhaustion washing over him. "You're welcome," he whispered. The people faded, dissolving into mist that drifted upward into the night sky. Stars twinkled brighter than before, as though celebrating their release. Jack remained kneeling, staring at the empty clearing. The forest was quiet now, calm, as though it had never been haunted. But he knew better. He pushed himself to his feet, every bone in his body aching. His revolver hung uselessly at his side. He retrieved the camera, its screen cracked but still glowing faintly. As he turned to leave the clearing, he allowed himself a single thought. It was over, or so he hoped. The following morning, Redwood Falls was quieter than Jack had ever known it. The air carried the scent of wet earth and pine, fresh from the night's battle. Smoke from the ruined mansion still curled faintly into the sky far behind him, a gray scar against the horizon. Birds sang again, timidly at first, then louder, filling the forest with a life that had been absent for far too long. Jack walked slowly down the narrow trail that led out of the woods, every muscle in his body heavy with fatigue. His shirt was torn, his hands scraped and raw, his eyes red from smoke and sleeplessness. But his heart felt lighter. The missing people had been freed. The creature, Harrow, was gone. The nightmare was over, or so he told himself. When he reached the edge of town, people were waiting. Families rushed forward, calling out names, clutching loved ones who had returned during the night. Mothers wept, fathers embraced their children. Siblings held each other tightly. The sheriff shook Jack's hand, eyes wet with relief, his usual sternness broken by gratitude. "You did it," he said hoarsely. "God help me. You actually did it." Jack forced a smile, though inside, he wasn't sure. Later that day, he sat in the small diner on Main Street, nursing a cup of bitter coffee. His notebook lay open in front of him, filled with hastily scribbled observations, dates, and sketches of the mansion's symbols. His battered camera rested on the table beside it, its cracked screen dark. He began to write, "The Redwood Falls Disappearances, an investigation by Jack Stevens." The words flowed easily at first. He wrote about the missing people, the cursed mansion, the strange machine in the forest, the shadows, the red glow. He documented the evidence as best he could, shaping it into a story the world might actually believe. But when it came to describing Harrow, the man-turned-monster, the ink, the storm of shadows, his pen hesitated. Who would believe it? If he told the truth, he'd be branded a lunatic. If he softened the details, the true horror would be lost. He pressed the pen harder against the paper, torn between duty as a journalist and duty as a witness. And then, for a split second, he saw it. A flicker. In the reflection of his coffee cup, two glowing red eyes. Jack froze, staring at the liquid surface. But when he blinked, they were gone. Only his own tired reflection stared back. That night, sleep did not come easily. He tossed in the small bed of the motel, the ticking clock on the wall amplifying his unease. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, made his heart jolt. His dreams, when they came, were thick with smoke and fire, with screaming faces and grasping hands. And always, always those eyes. The next morning, Jack drove out of town. Redwood Falls faded behind him in the rearview mirror, its quiet streets returning to their small-town calm. Children played again in the park, stores reopened. The sheriff stood outside his office smoking a cigarette. Life was moving on, but Jack couldn't. As the miles rolled away beneath his tires, he kept glancing into the mirrors, half expecting to see a shadow trailing the car. The camera lay on the passenger seat, silent, but sometimes he swore he heard a faint hum from its circuits, as though it were still feeding on something unseen. Weeks passed. Jack returned to the city, finished his report, and submitted it to his editor. The article went viral, haunting, bizarre, but grounded enough in fact to catch the public's imagination. People praised him for uncovering the truth. They called him brave, relentless, a savior for the town. But Jack knew better, because the nightmares didn't stop. Every night, he dreamed of the mansion's window glowing red. Every morning, he woke with the taste of smoke in his throat. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes too long, he swore he could hear Harrow's laugh low, mocking, promising. One evening, Jack stood by his apartment window, staring out at the city skyline. Neon lights flickered, cars honked in the distance. The world moved on as if nothing had changed. But he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in some forgotten corner of the earth, the evil still lingered. And then he saw it. Far below, on the street across from his building, a figure stood, tall, motionless, watching. Even from that distance, Jack knew those eyes, two crimson embers burning in the dark. His breath caught in his throat. He blinked and the figure was gone. Jack gripped the windowsill, his knuckles white. A single thought chilled him deeper than anything else. Maybe destroying the mansion hadn't ended Harrow. Maybe it had only set him free. He turned back to the table where his camera sat. His cracked screen flickered once, just once, with faint static. And in that static, two red eyes glowed. Jack staggered back, heart hammering, but the screen went black again, as if nothing had happened. The silence in the apartment pressed in around him. He whispered to himself, his voice trembling, "It's not over." Epilogue. In Redwood Falls, the mansion's ruins still smoldered weeks later. Locals swore the earth around it never cooled, that at night, strange shadows wandered among the charred stones. And sometimes, from the blackened skeleton of the house, a dim red glow pulsed faintly in the windows that no longer existed. The end, or not?